For nearly 6 months, we've talked about ransom notes, Bitcoin, DNA, Nest cameras, genetic genealogy, and new technology. But today I want to ask a much simpler question. Where are the boots on the ground? Where is the renewed community push? How do we build on the attention that content creators have already brought to this case and get Porch Guy's image in front of even more people in Tucson? Because Porch Guy is not a theory. He's not a rumor. We can see him. We've all seen him a few times. And somewhere, somebody may recognize the way that he walks, the way that he stands, his eyes, his build, and maybe even the clothing or equipment that he was carrying. But people have to be looking before they can recognize him. So after nearly 6 months, have we placed so much confidence in technology that we've forgotten what old-fashioned police work really looks like? Maybe this case needs more than another computer. Maybe it just needs more people on the ground.
On or about February 1st, 2024, the victim, an 84-year-old female, was taken from her residence by an unknown subject. The subject was captured on a doorbell camera walking toward the front door. The subject has not been identified. That is the public record. That is the dry, bureaucratic summary of a home invasion kidnapping that stopped a nation cold. But read those words again and tell me what's missing. There is no mention of a ransom. There is no mention of a motive. And most critically, there is no name. We have a frozen image of a man wearing a dark jacket, a backpack, and a look of casual purpose. We have his gait. We have his build. What we do not have, nearly half a year later, is a single person who has looked at that image and picked up the phone with his name. Think of that doorbell recording not as a video, but as a single photograph pinned to a corkboard fading in the sun. The ink is bleeding, the corners are curling, and the only thing separating that picture from a name is the courage of one person who hasn't spoken yet.
Because Porch Guy is not a theory. He's not a rumor. We can see him. We've all seen him a few times. And somewhere, somebody may recognize the way that he walks, the way that he stands, his eyes, his build, and maybe even the clothing or equipment that he was carrying. But people have to be...
The picture hasn't changed. Before we go deeper into what the documents actually show, make sure you're subscribed to Crime Files 90 LNN. Because we don't just cover the story, we follow the evidence. The Nancy Guthrie investigation has become a labyrinth of competing narratives. We have veered from the empirical to the theatrical. The public discourse is no longer dominated by the physical reality of a woman forcibly removed from her home. It is dominated by the spectral existence of ransom notes. Which ones were written by the kidnappers, which ones were forged by the desperate, and which ones are merely static interfering with the signal.
Now, we don't know everything that investigators are doing behind the scenes. We don't know every interview or every lead. We don't know every person that they've looked at. We don't know exactly where the DNA stands today, but we know what the public sees. And this case has slowly become buried under its own noise. Are the ransom notes real? Are they fake? Was this kidnapping for ransom? What does Derek Colella know? Is the DNA usable? Is genetic genealogy underway? Question after question after question. Some of those questions matter, but somewhere along the way, we've lost the simple one. Who took Nancy Guthrie?
But while the digital ink is still drying on these endless textual analyses, we are ignoring a far more dangerous variable, the expiration date of human memory. The FBI has designated this a kidnapping for ransom investigation, and that classification matters.
We've heard conflicting reports about the ransom communications. We've heard questions about which may be legitimate. And we've heard the FBI say that this continues to be investigated as a kidnapping for ransom case. That's a lot for ordinary people to process. And when the message becomes confusing, people start asking, is this case going anywhere? Maybe that's unfair. Behind the scenes, investigators, they may have a very clear direction. DNA testing may be progressing. The video and digital evidence may be narrowing the field. We don't know. But public confidence matters for one reason, and that's tips.
It creates a ticking clock that is not just legal but biological. Every day that passes without an arrest is a day that a neighbor's memory blurs. A co-worker's suspicion fades. A wife's gut feeling is rationalized into silence, which brings us to a question this channel refuses to let go of. Are we relying on the sophistication of genetic genealogy to save us from the hard, uncomfortable work of looking a suspect in the eye? The former FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffindaffer has publicly articulated what many in law enforcement are thinking. She believes the break in this case may not come from a sterile lab in Quantico, but from a layperson recognizing a distinctive physical trait. The swing of an arm, the stoop of a shoulder, the specific placement of a foot on the pavement.
You know, a former FBI Special Agent, Jennifer Coffindaffer, she was recently asked how she believes that this case may ultimately be solved. Her answer caught my attention because she believes it may come down to somebody identifying porch guy from the video. A person. Somebody who recognizes his walk or his build, his posture, and the way that he moves. And I agree 100% with her. But Jennifer, she did not dismiss the forensic evidence. She believes investigators may have more DNA than the public knows about. She also pointed to camera footage that may show vehicles moving through corridors away from Nancy's home during that critical time.
That is not a dismissal of forensic science. It is a recognition that forensic science requires a suspect to compare against. The labs have the ability to extract microscopic traces of humanity from a piece of tape or a strand of hair. But the machine does not knock on the door. The machine does not make the arrest. The machine can give you a genetic map, but it cannot give you a motive. It cannot tell you why this 84-year-old widow. Here is the strategic failure we are currently witnessing. We have entered a phase of passivity disguised as patience. We tell ourselves that the FBI has a plan, and the DNA is processing, and the cell tower dumps are triangulating. That may be true. I hope it is. But you do not build a murder, kidnapping prosecution on hope. You build it on the cold aggregation of evidence. And sometimes, the final piece of that mosaic isn't a secret laboratory breakthrough. It is a mundane tip from a human being who finally sees the video at the right moment, in the right state of mind.
You don't always wait for information to come to you. Sometimes you develop information. There were times when we needed information from people who weren't exactly lining up at the police station to help us. Now, you could sit in the office and stare at the telephone and hope that somebody decided to talk, or you could get in your patrol car and go to work. You went where the people gathered. You talked to people. You asked questions. And when law enforcement keeps showing up, people start talking. One person points you toward another. That person remembers a conversation, and suddenly you have something.
This is the intersection where technology and boots on the ground collide. A tip provides the direction. The forensics provide the handcuffs.
People recognize people in ways that technology sometimes cannot. You know, a wife recognizes the way that her husband stands. A coworker recognizes a walk. A brother recognizes a pair of shoes. Somebody may recognize those eyes. Somebody may recognize that backpack.
Now, let's look at the visual evidence that the public has been allowed to see. It is a masterclass in eerie normality. The subject is not running. He is not driving a getaway car. He is walking with the unremarkable rhythm of a man checking his mail or returning from a jog. That is the horror of the image. But it is also the solution hidden inside the horror. Sociopaths and criminals do not walk like aliens. They walk like humans. They walk like husbands leaving for a shift. They walk like sons returning from the store.
And think back to February. You know, everybody was talking about Nancy Guthrie. Her picture was everywhere. News trucks were in Tucson. National media was covering this case every day. People were studying the timeline, the cameras, the vehicles. They were studying the front porch and that masked person. Yes, some speculation went a little too far, but People were paying attention. And
The gait is a biometric password, but unlike a computer, the human brain does not need a search warrant to unlock it. A family member does not need probable cause to feel a chill run down their spine when they see a sweatshirt they've seen 1,000 times. The problem is saturation, or rather, the lack of it. In the initial weeks, the saturation was total.
I want to give credit where credit is due, because content creators have helped keep Nancy Guthrie's case in front of the public. Some have gone to Tucson. Some live there. Some have walked public areas connected to this case. And some have studied the timeline. Some have talked to many local people. And many have spent hundreds of hours keeping Nancy's name in the conversation. Have creators gotten everything right? No, they haven't. But neither has the media. And I certainly haven't claimed to have every answer myself.
Today, the saturation has receded, replaced by analysis paralysis. We are dissecting the grammar of the ransom notes instead of plastering the face of the abductor on every gas station pump in Pima County.
Because people's circumstances, they change. The person who wouldn't talk in February may be ready to talk in July. Relationships, they fall apart and friendships end. People get scared. Somebody who once felt loyal may no longer feel loyal. So after nearly 6 months, I wouldn't only ask who saw something on February the 1st. I'd ask who knows somebody who has acted differently since February the 1st. Who suddenly left Tucson? Who maybe stopped showing up? Who unexpectedly sold a vehicle? Who got rid of a phone? Who became unusually interested in this case? Who talked about details before those details were widely known? Or who...
And if we want to understand how to finally put a name to the person standing on that porch, we need to ask a question that flips this entire narrative from a political headline into a psychological thriller. What happens if the one person who can identify Porch Guy isn't ignoring the news, but is actively terrified that he's already been watching them? If he has threatened them, if they are an accessory, or if they are trapped in the same orbit of control, they aren't just turning off the television. They are praying the world stops looking. That is why we do not slow down. That is why we force the image back into the light. The picture hasn't changed. We must operate on the assumption that the individual in that doorbell footage did not evaporate after the crime. He returned to a life. He returned to a job, or he quit a job. He returned to a household, or he abandoned one. He had a routine, and that routine was shattered. In my years in law enforcement, I learned that the most dangerous moment for a fugitive isn't the act of running. It is the split second they have to act normal the morning after, when the news is on and their face is plastered on the screen. Somebody saw that split second. Somebody noticed the twitch. Somebody noticed the sudden obsession with the case, or worse, the absolute refusal to discuss it. Somebody noticed the car being detailed at 3 in the morning, the backpack being thrown away, or the sudden hunting trip that took them out of state for 2 weeks in February. Those behaviors are not proof, but they are the raw materials of reasonable suspicion. And reasonable suspicion, relayed to the right detective, opens doors that a closed mouth never will. There is a dangerous misconception that if you do not have a signed confession or a 4K video of the actual abduction, you do not have enough to call. That is a lie. A prosecution is a brick wall. You need bricks. A partial license plate is a brick. A sudden change in behavior is a brick. A discarded jacket is a brick. A whisper at a bar is a brick. The FBI has a $1.2 million reward, but money cannot buy the one thing this case needs: the moral clarity to choose an 84-year-old widow over a violent associate. People's circumstances change. Loyalties rot.
The Guthrie investigation, my first thought is, of course they have. We're nearly 6 months into this case. The question isn't whether tips have slowed down. The question is, what are we doing to create new ones? Maybe it's time for another community push. Put Nancy's picture and Porch Guy's image back everywhere. Put them on the billboards, posters, in storefront windows, local businesses. Put it in English and...
The person who was too scared to talk in February may be furious enough to talk now, but they will only talk if they think we haven't forgotten. They will only risk their safety if they believe the pursuit is relentless. If we stop talking, they stop trusting.
Nancy Guthrie is missing. An 84-year-old woman, widow woman, she was taken from her home. A masked person was captured at the home. That person has not been publicly identified. And when I say captured, I don't mean he was captured. He was captured on camera. You know, there's a $1.2 million reward still sitting out there. And investigators, they need information. That's the message. Because the ransom notes have almost become the main character in this investigation. They're not.
The public messaging must return to its simplest form. Nancy Guthrie is missing. An individual in a dark jacket was seen entering her property at the exact moment of her disappearance. That person has distinctive physical characteristics visible on camera. Do you recognize the walk? Do you recognize the posture? Do you recognize the backpack? The ransom subplot has become the main character, a noisy distraction that allows the actual perpetrator to hide behind a wall of textual ambiguity.
You cannot recognize somebody that you're no longer being shown. That's why I agree with the idea of billboards, posters, a renewed media campaign. Put Porch Guy's image back in front of Tucson. Local businesses, gas stations, convenience stores, social media, the local television, and yes, Spanish language outreach as well. Reach the entire community, because we sometimes assume that everybody knows about this case. They don't.
But the person on the porch is not ambiguous. He is solid, he casts a shadow, he breathes. And somewhere in Tucson, or somewhere far from it, there is a dog that didn't get fed that night because its owner didn't come home on time. There is a shift that went uncovered. There is a phone that went dark. We need a renewed community push that bypasses the algorithmic noise of social media and hits the tactile reality of the town. Billboards, flyers in Spanish and English, convenience store counters.
But, you know, responsible attention to an unsolved case, it should not be suppressed. It should be encouraged responsibly. And I'm not talking about accusing innocent people. I'm not talking about chasing families or even trespassing. Those lines matter. But showing Nancy's picture, showing the publicly released image of Porch Guy, reminding people about the reward, asking the community to just take another look. There's value in that, because it only takes one person, one memory, one conversation. It just takes one phone call.
The places where people who don't watch true crime documentaries live their lives. Because the person who knows might not be a digital native. They might be a retiree who notices a neighbor's son acting strangely. They might be a mechanic who recognized a torn seam on a jacket sleeve.
Now, maybe investigators already know who Porch Guy is. Maybe the FBI has identified him. Maybe they're building a case. Maybe they're just waiting on DNA. Maybe they're comparing digital evidence. All of that is possible. But until there's an arrest, you keep working. You don't slow down. You keep working. Not until you have a good theory. Not until your instincts tell you you're right. But until you can prove it. And sometimes the piece that helps prove it comes from the last person that you expected. Maybe it was a neighbor or a coworker, a relative. It might have been that convenience store employee, or possibly a patrol officer who remembers stopping somebody.
It takes one call. I have seen cold cases crack on evidence thinner than a razor blade. The difference between a closed case and a cold one is often just the refusal to go home at the end of the shift. Let's be clear about what we are not doing. This is not a call for vigilant identification. This is not a call to dox a silhouette or ruin a life based on a grainy frame. That is a line that cannot be crossed. This is a call for a controlled, directed surge of public awareness, orchestrated to feed raw information into the official channels where investigators can filter it. Let the FBI do the filtering. Let the detectives do the knocking. The public's job is to be the eyes, not the judge. We must look at the person we've been protecting, whether through a friendship, a kinship, or a shared roof, and ask ourselves if the preservation of that bond is worth the silence over a grave that has not yet been found. The forensic testing will continue. The genetic genealogy will grind forward. The digital footprint will be unpacked. But the technology has a blind spot. It cannot yet interpret the look of desperate denial in a son's eyes. Only another human being can do that.
There are still thousands of us looking. There are creators still talking. There are viewers still sharing. And we're doing something very simple now. We're refusing to forget Nancy. We still see you standing on that porch. And somewhere, somebody knows who they're looking at. The only question is, how much longer are they willing to protect you?
The picture hasn't changed. The person standing on that porch is still standing there, frozen in amber, a loop of pixelated infamy. The question is not whether we have the technology to see him. We do. The question is whether we possess the collective will to look at him one more time. The FBI's wanted poster for Nancy's kidnapper, the official flyer, is still live on their website. I want you to pull it up. Look at the frame. Mute the noise. Look at the stance. And then I want you to ask yourself the only question that matters, a question that reframes this entire case as the thriller it really is if you knew him, if you had lived with him, loved him, or feared him. Could you swear to yourself that he wasn't the man in that image? We are not looking for a monster in a horror movie. We are looking for a man who exists in the real world.